This is MichMash, a weekly conversation where we try to unjumble an important and sometimes under-the-radar statewide story that affects you. I'm Cheyna Roth.
And I'm Gorchow. Well, this week, the Michigan Legislature officially gabbled in for a new year and a new legislative session.
The House will stand at ease at the call of the chair.
That new year comes new power, especially in the state house. Representative Matt Hall is now leading the majority party, which has switched to Republicans. He's the new Speaker of the House. Zach, usually the first day back in session is kind of like the first day of school. There's some housekeeping, some getting to know new people. Were there similar vibes during the first day of session, or were Republicans looking to hit the ground running?
I would say this was definitely a day with some bona fide legislative newsy developments, not a just how are you doing, nice to see ya opening day. We knew going into the day the House would make its first two bills changes to the soon to take effect laws raising the minimum wage, especially for tipped workers, and establishing mandatory paid sick time for workers. And the House released its draft bills on those topics. In something of a surprise, majority Democrats in the Senate also introduced bills on those upcoming laws as well. The Democratic bills scale both laws back, but not as significantly as the House Republican legislation.
Those laws first passed in 2018, and they were overridden by Republicans in charge at the time, but that was under a court ruling, which will take effect February 21st. It seemed clear that date would make this topic one of the first big issues out of the gate at the Capitol, and sure enough, it is.
So the question now is going to be whether the new House Republican majority and the continuing Senate Democratic majority can reach a compromise. The Senate Democratic version closes the gap between the tipped minimum wage and the regular minimum wage, albeit far from bringing tipped workers all the way up to the regular minimum. Meanwhile, the House Republican version keeps workers at 38% of the standard minimum wage with no change. And there are huge differences in how the two sides approach the sick time law. The other big news with the start of the session is that Speaker Hall announced a robust oversight structure, saying the House would give the Oversight Committee immediate subpoena power, plus create 6 new oversight subcommittees on topics ranging from tax incentives to what he is calling the weaponization of government.
Right. It seems clear House Republicans want to send a message to the Democratic governor, which is, we're watching. Zach, a sort of coveted spot for a bill is to be a House or Senate bill number 1. And this year's Senate Bill 1 is freedom of information expansion, something we've talked a lot about on this show. It's an issue that was killed during lame duck last year. Are you optimistic given that it now has that coveted number 1 spot, or is it going to turn out to be something more symbolic than anything?
It is hard to be optimistic on this one. It's just been term after term of it not getting done. That being said, this is a clear message from the Senate. They want this done quickly. They're not even going to route it through committee. They're just going to hold it on the floor and pass it probably in a couple of weeks. Senator Jeremy Moss, a Democrat from Southfield, has really championed this issue, and he's made it clear we're prioritizing this. But ultimately, this is going to be up to the new House Republican majority. When they were in the minority, they were supportive, but now they're in charge. And when a minority party becomes the majority party, they often get cold feet about this idea. See the House Democrats last term. There are no firm commitments from the House Republicans yet on this issue.
We're going to take a quick break here, but stick around because when we come back, Zach is talking to State Representative Joe Argona, a Republican from Macomb County and part of Speaker Hall's leadership team. They're talking about what House Republicans have planned now that they're in charge. Stick around.
Welcome back. I'm Gorchow. Joining me now is State Representative Joe Argona. He's a second-term Republican member of the Michigan House from Clinton Township in Macomb County. He got his start in Lansing as a staff member for a member of the House before getting elected to his township board. He's also worked management in local government and for his family's jewelry company. He is now part of the House Republican leadership team. Welcome, Representative.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. So, Republicans get the gavel. Started at just after noon yesterday on Wednesday. We're recording on Thursday. It's a big change. What would you say are the main objectives of the new House Republican majority in this new year?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that we're very excited to work on. First of all, we want to bring more value to the taxpayer, to their taxpayer dollars. We want them to be able to see the government's working for them. So we are working on the oversight committee. That's going to be a bit bigger. It's going to be a bit more robust. For people around Lansing, they generally see that House members are kind of put into two different silos, either and appropriations, they're mainly focused on the appropriations process, or they're mainly focused on new policy, creating new policy. We're going to see a third silo. We're going to see an oversight silo. We're going to see a number of subcommittees. And we're just basically taking a look and trying to find things throughout the state government and find answers that we really haven't gotten over the last 2 years and even further than that. So that's going to be a big priority. As you've seen, the first two bills, we're trying to change the tip credit issue that came from our activist Supreme Court. We really want to make sure that we protect restaurants, we protect restaurant workers, and we protect our restaurant economy throughout the state. So those are kind of some of the bigger things that you're going to see us move on pretty quickly.
So yeah, the draft bills were announced yesterday on the two issues you mentioned, preserving the idea that tipped workers have a lower minimum wage, but that's because they make more than the regular minimum wage in most cases through their tips.
And they always make at least.
And they always make at least. That's sort of a misunderstood concept, that the idea of the tip credit is if your tips don't get you to the regular minimum wage, then you do have to be paid your wage to get up to that. That's correct, right?
Correct.
That's
you never make below. I just did a town hall at a restaurant with a bunch of restaurant workers and restaurant owners at the end of December. And one of the restaurant workers, she was actually mentioned in the Macomb Daily, where she made, I think it was 70 or 75,000 is what she estimates she makes throughout the year. That's well above minimum wage.
So how do you see this going? The Republicans in the House have their draft bills on that issue, as well as the sick time issue. Mm-hmm. These are laws enacted in 2018. Long story we don't have time to get into here, but they're going to take effect February 21st. And in the wage side, if that law were to stay in place, tipped workers would make the regular minimum wage eventually. And then on the sick time side, every worker, no matter the size of the employer, no matter the number of hours worked, would be able to earn 1 hour of paid sick time for every 30 hours worked, to a maximum of, depending on the size of the employer, 42 or 72 hours, I believe. The Republican bill, though, would really change this and would say, if you're an employer, whether that's a business or a nonprofit or whatever, that's less than 50 employees, you don't have to do this. Talk about that. What's the thinking behind the way this would be restructured? Yeah,
so I kind of want to go back to something you mentioned, that it's coming in February is when these changes are going to take effect. So I do want to touch on that real quick. I mean, if we get rid of the tipped wages and everybody's making just minimum wage, menu prices are going to go up. People are going to go out to eat less. Restaurants are going to close. People are going to lose their jobs. So we have to fix that. On the issue that you're discussing with paid time off, and some with unpaid time off, you definitely got the basics where it's 30 to 1, but there's other issues surrounding it where we're getting a lot of questions from businesses, and we're sitting there telling them we're not sure. I mean, it's going to take an army of lawyers to weave through some of the details on this if we don't make some changes, simplify it for business owners so that they understand it, so that workers understand it. There's still big issues where right now, if we do nothing, people will be able to take 3 days off with no notification, and there will be a cause of action if you do try and punish them for taking those 3 days off. That's not a good model to have if we want to have a strong economy. So those are definitely some changes we need to make. We took a very hard stand back in December that we wanted to negotiate on this. And we were told we would be able to negotiate on this and at least get something done for businesses and for restaurants. And then all of a sudden, that rug was pulled out from under us. We weren't allowed, the no negotiation was going to happen. We sat down on the negotiating table. Nobody was sitting across from us. That was very disheartening. So that's why you saw a lot of things happen last December where, Republicans walked off the floor. So now that we have majority, We've started introducing this. We've told everybody that this is going to be one of our top issues, if not actual top issue. We want to move this quickly. And what you've seen is the Senate has now introduced a package of bills.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, they look a bit different, but at least we can sit down and see somebody across from the negotiating table. And ultimately, that's really what we need. And that's what Michigan needs so that we can protect workers and we can protect businesses.
And I was going to ask you about that. The Democrats in the Senate, who are still the majority party there, they did somewhat surprisingly, unexpectedly, introduce bills on the same topic yesterday. Maybe don't go quite as far as the House Republican ones do. But seeing that, do you feel like, you know what, there's a real chance to get something done here, albeit it's probably going to take a negotiation?
Yeah, I know that House Republicans want to get this done. I think there's a lot of House Democrats that want to get this done. And I think there's people in both caucuses in the Senate that want to get something done. So as long as there's movement and it's a bipartisan movement, I'm very hopeful that we're going to get something done in the next couple of weeks.
So somewhat relatedly, you sponsored a bill in the previous term that would exempt tips from the state income tax. There's a lot of discussion about that at the federal level. President Trump has said he wants to do that on the federal income tax. Do you think this could happen at the state level too? Is that down the road discussion after some of these other things?
Yeah, so I'd love to see it get done. President Trump came out with it. Kamala Harris supported it, his opponent. I introduced the bill last term. Now, obviously, I believe I introduced that 6 months into the year, and we only had a few session days the last 6 months of the year. We really didn't have a lot of session days at all in 2024. So there wasn't really a lot of time, unfortunately, to get that done. But my whole motivation for that is if there's a bipartisan support, especially at a national level, why shouldn't there be here in Michigan? And what that really does is reward hustle, right? I mean, servers and people who work in the tipped industry, they hustle, and the harder they hustle, the more dollars they earn. I think that's something we should reward. That's part of the American spirit, right? That's part of the American dream is the harder you work, the better you'll do. So let's allow them to do a little bit better by exempting income tax from what they're doing.
So you mentioned up at the top this new structure with the oversight committees. I think you teed it up in a really interesting way that folks around Lansing, I think, will make sense to them as to what you're attempting to do, which is usually there's these two silos, policy committees and the appropriations committees. That was really interesting how you said we're creating a third one. It's the oversight concept. What was the thinking? Usually there would be an oversight committee. The legislature historically has not done a lot of oversight. We had Jim Townsend from the Carl Evans Center for Oversight and Democracy from Wayne State on in November, and he also said, he's a former Democratic state representative, Michigan legislature, not great at robust oversight, but it appears there's going to be a real push to change that. How did you come up with there's 6 different subcommittees? It sounds like there will be everything from, I'm going to forget a couple here, but things looking at like economic incentives to attract business. I believe there's one called the weaponization of government. There's something on public health. There's a few others. I'm sorry, I don't remember all of them. Okay. But how were those selected? And then how do you avoid this becoming overtly or at least seen as partisan? It's the Republicans in the House. They're just out to get the Democratic governor.
Yeah, I would hope it wouldn't get seen as that. We're trying to bring a higher value for the tax dollars that people give state government throughout Michigan. We're trying to give them more for what they spend. So these subcommittees are meant to try and encompass the breadth of state government, and as well as issues where we've seen in the past where we haven't gotten answers. We really haven't gotten a lot of answers out of a lot of things over the last 2 years, and I'd even say even more than that. One example is Faye Baydoun. She's a friend of the governor. She sat on the MEDC board. She was given a $20 million grant for a business incubator. She spent some of that money on a $4,500 coffee maker, $40,000 in furniture. She spent it on over $400,000 a year for her and her secretary in wages. But what have they done? How did she even get that? How did she get that grant? Which, by the way, that's another thing we want to change. If you're going to put an earmark in, you should have your name on it, and you should be able to defend it. And if you can't do that, then maybe we shouldn't be spending taxpayer dollars on it, right? But those are, the whole Faye Baydoun situation, we still don't have answers as to why she spent the money the way she did, and even what businesses she's helped. So those are the type of things that we need to take a look at. You mentioned the weaponization of state government. The Attorney General said that what Republicans and Democrats did last year was literally criminal. That seems, I can't fathom why she would have said that, and I'm assuming she was sober-minded at that
This
point.
is the representatives referring to when Attorney General Dana Nessel said when the Republicans walked off the floor and a Democrat in the House and a Democrat in the Senate didn't show up to vote in sessions, that it was criminal, willful neglect of duty.
And literally criminal. I don't understand how you can accuse us as the Attorney General, as the state's top cop, of committing a criminal act at that point. So there's a variety of things that we still don't have answers to, and I think the people of Michigan deserve answers to. And so that's why we're trying to make the Oversight Committee, which has had similar subpoena powers in the past, we're trying to make it a bit more robust so that we can dig down and get to some of these answers.
Now, why in the past, usually when they're on the occasion where there are these investigations, they will start out without subpoena power, and then if the committee feels the people it wants to speak with are not being forthcoming or not providing the documents requested, then you go and get the resolution from the House saying subpoena power for this committee. But this is saying right out of the gate in the House rules, the Oversight Committee has subpoena power right away. Why not? What's wrong with the other way of doing it?
I think because of the many answers on many different subjects that we haven't gotten it. And by the way, the subcommittees, I don't believe are actually going to have subpoena powers.
Right.
I believe it's the top.
Yep.
So it's one of these things where the subcommittees are going to be doing the groundwork. And kind of like you mentioned, if they're not getting the answers they need to, all right, we're going to kick it up to this top committee, and they already have subpoena powers. And this is not something that's supposed to be partisan. It is really truly supposed to be bipartisan. The people sitting on that committee, there's going to be Democrats on that committee. If there's things that you see that you think need to be investigated, let's do it together. And hopefully we don't find anything. Truly we want to see that there is value for the taxpayers of Michigan. But it's our job as a legislator to be that check and balance on the departments and to ensure that the taxpayer dollars are being spent wisely.
So MichMash listeners, you may remember that toward the end of the year, we had Detroit News reporter Beth LeBlanc on. She did a lot of the reporting on the coffee maker that Representative Aragona referenced. I do recommend go back and listen to that for more details on that. And you mentioned something else I wanted to ask you about, which is the change in the House rules this week regarding what are called enhancement grants. Now, listeners, that is a very Lansing-y budget term that for what in regular speak would be a specific spending item for a project or an organization. Maybe there's a nonprofit group in a representative's area that does really good work, or that representative thinks they do really good work and they're given a grant to help continue that work. Or there's something that's like a piece of infrastructure and that sort of thing. Now, the House rules that the chamber adopted on Wednesday would say, if we're going to do that, it's going to be listed right away what legislator requested it and who the intended recipient is. There's the departments have sometimes indicated we have no idea who's supposed to get this when we're trying to figure out how to do it. So Can you discuss why that was done? Yeah.
So you mentioned it's sometimes called enhancements grants. It's sometimes called earmarks. I think one of the negative terms would be pork barreling, right?
Yeah.
So what we're attempting to do is if you're trying to convince a legislator to spend money, then your name should be attached to that. If you really think it's truly a good idea, you should be able to stand up and say, this is why I think this is a good idea, and defend it. And it shouldn't be something that's just thrown into a budget. For instance, again, going back to Faye Baydoun's $20 million that was given by the legislator, nobody can tell us why it was put in there. The governor's office is pointing at the legislator's pointing back at the governor, but nobody really is saying, well, this was mine and this is why it got put in. That's not right. If you see a line item in a budget, you should be able to defend it. I personally, Zach, I come from Macomb County. Roads is a huge issue. That's something that I'm going to try and go after. That's something that I would like to see us work on over the next 2 years is stable funding and change the funding formulas for roads so that we can actually fix the roads, because we really haven't been over the last couple of years. And that's something I'll even go over in budgets for certain areas that are pain points and where roads have really gone in disrepair throughout Macomb County. And I'm sure plenty of my colleagues throughout the Southeast on the Republican side and the Democratic side have similar type issues, and especially road type issues throughout their districts. But I can, if I come and say, I want money for X road, I'll be able to defend it and tell you why it's needed in Macomb County, and why I truly believe that this is a wise tax dollars being spent. If you can't do that on your project, then we really shouldn't be spending taxpayer dollars on it.
Should these grants exist at all? They've certainly become part of the culture and patterns in Lansing, I would say, starting at the end of 2018, but and some of this is because the budget wasn't great, the economy wasn't great, but really from like maybe 2002, I would say well into the mid 2010s, there were no enhancement grants as they are now known and seen, and sometimes $1 billion or more in a budget. Should they even exist?
Yeah, I would be more than happy to. I truly believe that we should hamper and inhibit exactly what we can spend money on. Again, I'm going to try and move towards some of our tax dollars being spent on roads in Southeast Michigan. I think it was a 2024 or 2023 budget, we had something like 6 or 7 swimming pools or splash pads that we spent money on. Well, I don't think you can really say that adds to the economic development that is needed throughout the state. I mean, maybe one person wants it, maybe a small group wants it, but is that really something that your tax dollars or my tax dollars should be going to spend on the west side of the state or downriver when I'm from Macomb County and you're from the Lansing area? Probably not. Roads is infrastructure. That's a need that's needed for our economy throughout the state. So you can make that argument for roads. I don't think you can make that argument for plenty of these enhancement grants, earmarks, whatever you want to call it, that have been, like you said, in budgets throughout the last couple of years.
So now Speaker Hall, but at the time the minority leader in the House and the House Republicans did put forward a road funding plan in November, December, one of the two, toward the end of 2024. There were some discussions with the governor and the Senate, but they didn't come to be. Do you think we'll see the now majority Republicans in the House push forward and pass some type of long-term road funding solution? Yeah,
so we are going to be taking that up as a major issue. Again, going back to the tipped wage issue and the pay time off, we see response out of the Senate. We see them bringing that to the table. We're not sure if there's going to be that appetite for roads. We have that appetite for roads. We're not sure if they do as well. We thought we had a great plan last year. We were taking a lot of existing revenues. Some of the CAT dollars that were expiring, those were going to be diverted towards roads. The House Democrats did publish a plan. I believe there was 19 cents extra on gas per gallon. I think there was an extra $100 on your registration. So, happy birthday, pay the state an extra $100 for your roads. So we thought our plan was a lot better, but we're hoping that people are going to. We're hoping Senate Democrats want to negotiate on that and hopefully get something done for the people of Michigan.
Last question, because I know you're a busy guy. You got a lot going on. It's a session day here in Lansing, after all. What do you think of expanding the Freedom of Information Act to the legislature and the governor's office? It looks like the Senate is planning to pass that quickly. Do you think the House Republican majority is interested in doing the same?
I haven't had a lot of discussions on it. I'm happy to do it. I'll be supportive. I got to say, Zach, I'm skeptical. A few months back, I was asked about that. And they asked if I thought there would be movement in 2024. And I said, no, actually, I think it's dead. And the person interviewing me asked why. And I said, well, the governor promised this when she was just campaigning for office. This is 6 years in, and it still hasn't been done. So why do I think that the governor's office would actually have any appetite to get this done or actually want it to get to her desk? I don't think she does. So to be honest, I'm still a little skeptical, but I personally am supportive.
Okay. Well, Representative, really appreciate you taking the time to join us, especially on a busy week with the Republicans getting started in the majority. Wish you well.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate it.